is how the story that I'm going to tell right now for the next 12 minutes, this is how that story ends. This is President Obama on the Mall in Washington, D.C. with 2 million people at his inauguration. This is how that story begins. Candidate Obama in the middle of a cornfield somewhere in the middle of Iowa, almost 2 years before. Now, it's election season again back home in the United States and here in Sweden. And so you're starting to see more and more articles, books, and blogs talking about this campaign and trying to answer the fundamental question. That question being, how do you go from being a candidate in a cornfield to being president with millions on the mall? That's the question that so many people are trying to answer. And it seems to me, like Marcus, I'm a political junkie, so I read all these books. And lots of them are really, really good. You should go buy them. I have. But based on the questions I'm getting here in Sweden and from friends back home who are listening to the answers, I think there is a mindset, two different mindsets developing around this story, both of which have aspects of the truth, but I think are missing something. And the first mindset are coming out of books and ideas all about the incredible, talented candidate, the amazing, extraordinary political times he found himself in, and the amazing team that he surrounded himself with. All those things are true. The second mindset comes from people who are reading about and learning the focus on the high technology stuff, the incredible use of social networking, of text messaging, of iPhone applications. And to oversimplify those two mindsets, mindset one is kind of, it's all fate. It will never happen again. It's these incredible combination of unique events. And the second set is, it's Facebook. So, it's fate or it's Facebook. Those are your choices. Now, I know this man, and I know the team that he surrounded himself with, and they are indeed incredible. And I know the technology, and it was indeed incredibly clever. But both the sort of fate angle and the Facebook angle alone, I don't think cut it. And there's another approach, and something that I saw as a volunteer, an unpaid volunteer on this campaign from the very beginning. And something I saw that I wanted to share with you, because I think it, not to glorify the past, because I think it's a really helpful tool for all of us as we tackle the future. And it's a very low-tech formula for success. And a low-tech formula I think we can each apply on the big, complicated challenges in our worlds. Brace yourselves, here's the simple formula. This was written on a whiteboard. This is my whiteboard, that's my handwriting. I rewrote it to capture it for posterity. But this was written on a whiteboard in Chicago at Obama headquarters, in the office of a guy named Joe Rosbars, who ran all of Obama's new media. He's an incredible guy, and as a quick aside, we're sitting here in Stockholm today. Joe used to live in Stockholm. And I learned, I've become pals with Joe. Joe left Stockholm. He used to teach English as a foreign language here. Having been here for 8 months now, I think I understand why Joe left as a teacher of English as a foreign language. Let me just say, I think most Swedes I meet speak English better than I do. So maybe he found trying to elect progressive political candidates back home in the US more of a challenge. In any case, he did a great job. This was on his whiteboard. Here's what it means. Number one, move the metrics that matter. In the US campaign, that is, you got to raise money, you got to recruit volunteers, and you got to ultimately win the votes. Number two, you got to lower the barriers to participate, get more people involved. And three, you got to raise the expectations of what it means to be involved in a campaign. Let's take money. Here's what it meant. In the old way, political campaigns would go out and they'd ask rich people for the maximum contribution, $2,000. The new way, under this formula, said, why don't we let people invest $25 at the beginning? The old way, as it relates to volunteers, said, how would you like to, every Tuesday night, leave your family and your children and come to a sort of depressing campaign office somewhere and call people you've never met before them and ask them to support your candidate. That's the old way. And you can imagine how many people said yes and how many people said no thank you. The new way said, stay at home on a Tuesday night. You don't have to give us 4 hours. Give us 40 minutes. Tuck your kids into bed, log on to a website, and we'll give you 10 names of people who live in your neighborhood, call and ask for their support. So, good examples of lowering the barriers. But if all you do is lower the barriers, 25 bucks and 10 phone calls doesn't get the job done. You have to raise expectations. You have to get, in the case of money, I can't just get you to give $25. I need you to invest again next month and the month after that. And I need you to be so excited about this campaign that you tell 5 of your friends and encourage them to invest. And you saw this play out, and I saw it play out in Louisville, where some of us are from, every day, repeating this cycle over and over again. And this happened in small towns and big cities all around America. And on the weekend before the election, something pretty amazing happened. This small, simple steps repeated led to a big result. Now, in order to explain the big result, it's not the election, you know the outcome there, something big happened and something very mathematical happened. And I'm going to have to introduce you to the first of 2 F words. So, yeah, don't know. So we said, you know, it's not Facebook, but in the course of the story, you're going to hear 2 F words. Here's the first one. A term of art in the political world called flake-rate. The Swedish translation is bortfallet. It's the number of people who flake out and don't do what they say they're going to do. And in a political campaign, an idealistic volunteer shows up on one of those Tuesday nights, and a very unidealistic campaign manager professional tells them about the flake rate. And it goes like this. If 10 people say yes, they'll come in and help you, only 5 will show up. Flake rate of 50%. If you're really lucky, that number could be as low as 30% flake rate, 7 people show up. Or if you're really unlucky because people are either convinced your candidate is going to lose or convinced their candidate is going to win, you could have the flake rate be as bad as 80%. So 8 out of 10 people flake. So here's the question for the group. The weekend before the election, all the Obama network is called into action. What was the flake rate on the weekend before the election? I've asked this question before. Yes, okay. Someone always has the audacity to guess 0. Okay. Anyone else think it's 0? Okay. Here's the answer. Negative 150%. Negative 150%. Think about that for a moment. That means that less than nobody flaked, or put another, nobody flaked, they brought friends. 10 people said they'd show up, 15 showed up. 100 people said they'd show up, 150 showed up. The term itself is useless. Right? It no longer applies. And I watched this happen, I saw this happen, and you wonder, you say, well, is this a freak of nature? You know, is this just a once-in-a-lifetime one-off that you get these incredible results? And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's a freak of nature. I think it's actually very natural. And this is the second F word. Because there's something that happens in nature, all around us, that can explain small, simple steps, repeated and repeated, leading to something really complex and fascinating. You see it in mountain ranges. You see it, apologies to our volcano refugees, you see it in volcanoes. And you see it in lava flows. And there's a term called fractals. I'm going to stick to snowflakes here because they're less politically sensitive than volcanoes. The snowflake, we're all taught in school that each snowflake is unique. That is true. But what also we are taught, what we sometimes forget, is if you look here, each snowflake is made up of tiny snowflakes. And if you look under a microscope at the tiny little snowflake, it too is made up of still yet tinier snowflakes. So the nature of a fractal is this. The part looks like the whole, and the whole looks like the part. Here's another example, I hope near and dear to the Swedes in the audience. Snowflakes and trees, something that come in abundance here in Sweden. Let's take a fractal from the beginning. In fractal speak, the pattern you start with is called a seed pattern. So here's the seed pattern. Just repeat it again, and repeat it yet again. And you get this big, complicated, wonderful tree. Kind of looks like a piece of broccoli. And yes, broccoli is fractal. Don't take my word for it. Go home, get a broccoli stalk, chop it down the middle, and look in the inside, and you'll see all these tiny little stalks and little stalks within the little stalks. So here we have fractals, small seed pattern, big result. And I think that's a way to go back and think about what happened here on this campaign. How did we go from the man in the cornfield to the million on the mall, 2 million on the mall? And how do we apply the fractal test like we do on the broccoli back home to this picture? Now something's not right here, because if you think about taking that pattern over here and repeating it, there's one man in a microphone and one man in a microphone. So that's not it. I think we need some new perspective here. So what's going on in this picture? Well, it's not more corn. That's not the answer. It's more people, right? There he is, asking questions, listening to their concerns, responding, and then in turn asking for their help on his campaign. That, I would argue, is the right way to look at the success of the Obama campaign. This is a seed pattern that repeated, and I was out there with those 2 million people on that cold day, and that's what I saw. Tons of little groups of people who've been asked for help who were able to plug in because the barriers were low. And that, I would argue, is what we should think about as we try to apply this lesson to the big challenges that we have in front of us. What is our seed pattern? And that is the question I have for all of you, and encourage you to ask yourselves. It is what President Obama is asking himself, and you can see that in his style of governing. That day of the inauguration wasn't the end. It's the end of this presentation. It's the beginning of what he's working on. The good people who organized TED, as we heard in the intro lecture, they had the wisdom to lower the barriers and let us do events like this. And this event for us is a seed pattern. We have Swedes, Americans, big business, startups, we have artists, we have academics, all together from the United States and Sweden engaging to help spread ideas. That's what we want to do again and again and again. And I challenge you to go home and ask yourself, what is my seed pattern? What is your seed pattern? Because it is as hard and as simple as that.